So let's talk about SAFE for a second. We think of it as it's a knowledge base. It's knowledge for people building the world's most important systems. It's a freely revealed knowledge base, meaning that everything we know we publish. There's no login at SAFE. If you go to the SAFE website and look around a little bit, which we'll do in a second, we're not going to capture your email. We're not going to say, hey, for another $10 a month, we could tell you what we really know. Everything we know is on the site. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that we learn those things from you. So we're in the field working with large enterprises who are both struggling and winning at applications development. And when they win, they learn new things. And when those things come from the lean and agile world, we codify those and we make sure that they operate in accordance with some of the basic principles that we'll describe, and we record that. So the website that I'll show you is an interactive knowledge base. It's there for you. You don't have to call us to use it. We're not going to send you an email if you log in, and we're not going to charge you to use it. The information is free. Now applying it, there's some work involved in that, as we'll see. But at least you know that what we know, you know. It's there on the site. So that's the Scaled Agile framework. And it's used to synchronize alignment and collaboration and delivery for large numbers of teams. Being used around the world, substantial percentage of the Global 100 have SAFE trained practitioners on site. 4 core values. The first one is built-in quality. I'm fond of saying you can't scale crappy code, and you can't, or hardware, or anything else for that matter. So if you don't focus on code quality, you're not going to be able to build a big, high-quality system. So we're very focused and very driven to make sure that the endemic quality of what is built by your teams is good, and then we give them the tools they need to do good work. They're motivated to do good work. I mean, it's their right and privilege to be able to create great quality outcomes. Program execution. As I mentioned by my little query to the classes that I teach, how's it going, that really big program? And the answer is not very well. Most large, complex software and systems programs don't execute well. The results are not as anticipated. They're not delivered on time. They don't have the requisite quality. They do not please or necessarily excite their stakeholders the way we could have done that. And if you can't execute large programs well, you're not going to accomplish much inside the enterprise. So SAFE is very focused on program execution. And alignment. Goodness, global alignment trumps local optimization. That's a principle of lean. And what do we mean by that? We mean that if 3 people or 5 teams or 20 or 30 teams work together in agreement on what they're building, they will outperform any group of teams that has a difference of opinion as to what this system is supposed to do or how it's supposed to work. So alignment isn't a simple matter of people being told what to do. Alignment is a matter of people agreeing and understanding that they're building the same thing and working together to a common mission. We'll talk a little bit about the manifesto a little later on in this course, but one of its key principles is trust. Well, it's really hard to build trust into a framework. I mean, I could put the word trust on there and you'd all kind of laugh and say, well, what does that do? Trust is a personal relationship. It's context-based, right? We trust people to do the right thing in situations of complexity, in situations of challenge. So we can't just put trust in the framework. What we can do, however, is we can put transparency in the framework. And you're going to see here, especially in this version 4, a lot more visibility of the work. So everybody knows what they're doing and how it's going. And that transparency gives us the ability to make changes and to improve outcomes and to change things before it's too late. One of my mentors once taught me that you can't manage a secret. So transparency is designed to make sure that there are no secrets. There's no hidden agenda. There's no, it really does work, but it really doesn't. Or we validated this, but we really didn't validate it. Or the customer looked at it and liked it, but they didn't really look at it, or they didn't like it. We need transparency. So those 4 values, built-in quality, program execution, alignment, and transparency, all work together. And if we focus on those core values in SAFE, you're going to get a pretty good outcome. So where did SAFE come from? Well, it seems fairly new. In 2011, we introduced SAFE 1.0. That was the first time we codified it as a website. It's about 5 or 6 years older than that. It was about 2005 or so that I started applying the methods of extreme programming and Scrum primarily. There were a few others active at the time, but those are the ones I use largely. Each year, we've had additional releases. There are version 1, version 2, version 3. I suspect that most of you watching this course know a little bit about version 3. It was in the market up until just January of this year. And then there's this other interesting thing, this LSE. What is that? That's a big branch. You know, we know our mantra about never branch. Well, sometimes you need to branch. You need to create an exploratory branch. And SAFE LSE is Safe for Lean Systems Engineering. So we had about an 18-month time to investigate with the world's largest systems builders how they would build systems in a lean and agile manner for systems of real scale, I mean mega scale, systems that take 500 or 1,000 people or maybe 5 or 10 suppliers and a prime contractor to build. Well, all of those have been merged now into version 4. Version 4.0 was announced in January of this year. This course is about version 4, but this course is built on that history, and that history comes from application in the field. So let's take a quick look at SAFE. You see here, SAFE 4.0. We even renamed it SAFE for Lean Software and Systems Engineering because we're confident now that we have a sufficient support for hardware and firmware development as well as software because many of our systems use plenty of both. And what you see here is what we describe as 3-level SAFE. That's quite backwards compatible with version 3. It's designed for that. There are some new things. You can see the foundation layer and others that I'll go through fairly shortly here, the gray background, but it's largely a re-rendering of version 3 with the inclusion of a number of new features, but I won't pause to go over those here. We have the whole course for that, but lots of new features, including things like, Kanban for agile teams, Kanban systems at the program and portfolio level, re-rendering of some of the key roles and activities, refactoring of built-in quality, and then, as I mentioned, the foundation layer for leadership and communities of practice, and other things that we'll talk about over time. If you hit the expand button, and this is certainly new to SAFE, the ability to collapse and expand, you see a different presentation. Here you see SAFE for large-scale systems. What do we mean by that? What is a value stream? Well, a value stream is an abstraction. It could be very tangible. It could be the solution that a single SaaS company presents to the market. It could be a set of security products. It could be a big system. It could be a satellite. It could be a single application. It's whatever the value is, however the value flows through your organization. And when they're big, you need additional constructs. We'll have a whole module on that later. We'll talk about how to coordinate multiple art value streams that take 3 or 5 or 800 people to build, and there are special constructs for that. But if you don't need that, if your system can be built by largely independent agile release trains, groups of 50 or 100 people working on a common development cadence, delivering on demand, then you probably don't need the additional constructs that you'll find in the value stream level. But if you do have 2, 3, 500, 1,000 or more people building a single system or a solution that has elements that have dependencies between them, then you'll need the value stream level. Both are there. Start simple and lightweight. If your problem can be addressed by a fairly modest size art or two, and expand when you need to. This is the first time we've had really different views of SAFE. SAFE is the same, right? The role of the release train engineer is the same, whether I'm in 3-level SAFE or 4-level SAFE. So consequently, when you navigate, you're going to learn the same types of things. But the question is, what constructs do you deploy? So the introduction of version 4 gives us a lot more configurability. And I just saw an email yesterday on the Scaled Agile Framework LinkedIn site about somebody saying, well, some people say SAFE is big, but let me tell you, until it had version 4, I was constantly having to fill in the blanks for how to get a couple of arts to work together. Or if they're going to plan together, well, do we show up with them all with independent backlogs? Or is there some coordination of that? And if we're building a big system, how do we integrate and deploy that system? Is it simply the individual arts, or do we need to bring those subsystems together into the larger solution? So the answer, many of the answers, or at least guidance to many of the practices, will be found in the value stream level where we coordinate large value streams, multiple arts. We'll talk about that in a later lesson in this course. So let's take a quick look at the website. Here we are at scaledagilepFramework.com. SAFE 4.0 for Lean Software and Systems Engineering. You're seeing the big picture. Actually, you're seeing what we call as a 3-level version of the big picture. If you want to see more, if you're working on a really big system and you need to coordinate multiple agile release trains, click here and you'll find the guidance that we described very briefly for that. We'll cover that later on in a module of the course. So we don't need to worry too much about that right now. Let's stick to the basics. You would expect to see menus that are helpful, maybe access to the blog, training. Training is offered around the world virtually every day. Various training courses, you can find those there. Leading Safe, Safe for product managers and product owners, Safe for teams, and more. You can join the community, get access to our newsletter. Principles, I haven't talked about principles and core values and mindset, but I'm certainly going to do that. I'm going to do that next. It is important to know about the guidance articles because there's lots of contributors and types of contribution that are very helpful. Just give you a very brief overview here because there's, gosh, I don't know, maybe a few dozen articles. Agile contracts, continuous delivery, domain modeling, features and components, Agile financial planning with SAFe, mixing Agile and waterfall development in SAFe, you may see that problem, and others, a short story on release planning and more. So that's guidance. Also, you can find the glossary there. Implementing is a story that I told you very briefly. I won't be covering that more. I may have a brief mention later on, but implementing 1, 2, 3, that's our strategy. The various case studies, not sure how many are there, 25 or 30, maybe more by the time you see this. You see some name brand companies and some other companies that you probably work behind the scenes. This is, I think, the world's second largest memory manufacturer. 55% defect reduction rate, not atypical at all. You'll see more like that. You may see substantial improvements in Net Promoter Score or whatever, or how they launched in the case of Intel's MDO organization. So plenty there to learn from. Presentations and downloads, you can find our posters, 3-level safe and 4-level safe posters, 3x5, as big and basically as small or as big as you want, the House of Lean and Lean Agile principles that I'll discuss in a second. But most importantly, are the fact that each article has a structure and has content. Perhaps you're interested in the customer. Well, everybody has one. That might be kind of boring. Well, actually, the customer has responsibilities. Every article is formed the same. There's navigation to tell you where you are. There's a quote that hopefully is inspirational or maybe a bit of a tease. An abstract, a set of details, typically a few graphics. Here's a figure that just shows the customer is integral to the value stream. Another figure down here talking about the fact that depending upon the nature of your solution, the customer's responsibilities are going to be different. If we're building a solution for others, that's one thing. If it's custom built or purpose built, then the customer has a different role. I don't want to belabor any one article too much, but anything from understanding how to inspect and adapt, which is the art level review, to, gosh, maybe you're just heading down this path and you want to know how to plan an iteration. You find guidance for iteration planning. Maybe this is too detailed for you. Maybe it's just what you need. Who would attend the iteration planning meeting? What's the agenda and what are the guidelines and some other hints and tips of the trade? So every article has depth. They're formed exactly the same. They have a standard form. Whether you're looking at an article on metrics, which is actually quite a big article because there's lots of things that can be measured. That's not to say that they should be measured, but an article that discusses the various metrics at the portfolio, program, value stream, and team level, and more. As I mentioned, the foundation layer, communities of practice, for the first time ever included in SAFe. We've talked about core values. We have yet to talk about the Lean Agile mindset, SAFe principles. We touched briefly on implementing 1, 2, 3. And frankly, any construct, whether it's something somewhat abstract like architectural runway, what is it and where does it come from? How do you build it? What happens when you use it up? To something that's much more straightforward, like let's run a good, solid team retro. It's all there for you on SAFe, and as we learn, we update. One last thing before I leave here, it's important to note that the big picture doesn't change that often. We can't change it that often. We used to, but customers are uncomfortable with basically a paradigm change when the big picture changes, but we update it constantly. So for example, the CapEx and OpEx article has been recently updated. So I blogged about that and talked a little bit about why the changes are there and then link you directly to a new article. So while the big picture remains static for some period of time, the content behind the big picture is constantly evolving. And I think that's what makes SAFe a safe place. Stability and innovation. Stability. This will remain unchanged for some time, not sure how long. 3-level and 4-level SAFe are with us for some time. 3-level SAFe, backwards compatible with 3.0. Innovation, we change things, we learn new things, we publish new things, we find new ways to express SAFe. We have a simpler rendering that we talk about for SAFe, and then various forms of news and articles and videos from around the net. So it's a pretty comprehensive site, not only in terms of the guidance that it provides, but the support from the community, the ongoing publication of news, other people's perspectives on SAFE. So take some time and navigate the site, maybe hit pause now and explore for yourself, and in a second then come back into the video course and we'll continue for there. So thanks for letting me take you on this little tour of SAFE. When we're looking at the site, we focused on a number of areas. One of those areas is, of course, the Agile team. And I'm fond of saying nothing beats an Agile team, and frankly, nothing does, because I worked in pre-Agile models for decades, like many of us, and the discovery for me, it was led by XP. I was introduced to Agile through XP, through others Scrum. XP and Scrum together, and now increasingly Kanban, all create good constructs for the team. What is an Agile team? Well, we use these words, very powerful and somewhat grandiose words. They're empowered, self-organizing, self-managing, and cross-functional. We're going to talk more about self-organizing and self-managing because it's not that we simply put 100 people in the room and say, who do you want to work with and how do you want to build this system? There's some management responsibility in understanding how to set up teams in a way that really addresses the organization's larger initiatives. But once established, and even thereafter, that those teams can self-organize and self-manage. In many ways, the nature of a long life Agile team, well, you see that some, and you also see people move from team to team and teams reorganize to the work at hand. And that's something that I think we learned about from Agile, and I think we really owe the thought leaders a real debt of gratitude for teaching us about how to create really great, small, cross-functional teams. What do? They deliver valuable, tested, working systems and software every 2 weeks. Period, end of story. I don't care how big the system is, how big the solution is. We want to strive to make sure that every 2 weeks we have new value. And at the team level, where a few teams are working together or a team by themselves can create a specific feature, we want to see a new feature every 2 weeks. And teams like that too. It's not like we're managers saying, hey, you should give me something every 2 weeks. The teams want to do that. They want to deliver value. They use a team framework. Ours combines the best of Scrum project management practices, XP-inspired technical practices, and Kanban for flow. We don't see a war between Scrum and XP and Kanban. We believe these methods are optimized for different things. And frankly, what software team, what mixed mode team, what cross-functional team in the year 2016 or beyond shouldn't understand the basic project management practices of Scrum? Some of the XP-inspired technical practices, things like pair work. Think about collective ownership a little bit. That belies a little bit our tendency to go very vertical with our I skills. I can do this, but that's my specialty. And if you get me outside of that specialty area, I'm not going to be as useful and valuable. We need skills that are much broader than that. T skills. And E skills, where you really have a degree of flexibility. And Kanban for flow. All teams can understand all of these aspects. It's not a war. It's not a method war. It's all good. Let's use what makes sense in our construct. Value delivery via user stories. For those of you who know a little bit of my background, I've written a lot on software and solution requirements over the years. It's kind of a bit of a kick for me. Been working in high assurance systems almost all my career. You have to know what the system does. So I talk about software requirements. I've done so for many, many years. User stories are a different beast. We'll introduce them only briefly here. This isn't a course in Scrum or XP 101, but user stories are small, independent pieces of value. They can be developed and written and tested and validated and deployed in a very short period of time. And we build our system one user story at a time. More on that later. Well, I guess there is something that beats an Agile team, and that's when those teams work together. So a team of Agile teams, that's what we call the Agile release train. And if you think about the Agile release train, it's simply a fractal above the team. What do I mean by that? It has the same basic behavior. Agile teams plan together, they commit together, they execute together, and they demo together, and they retrospect together. Well, we do the same thing at the ART. Here we have our teams of teams, and they plan together, they commit together, they execute together, they demo together, and they inspect and adapt together. So it's the same basic pattern. That pattern, by the way, it's not a secret, the iteration pattern. I mean, from the 30s, we've known that the basic scientific method is easily codified by plan, do, check, and act. Well, that's an iteration. And we have two sets of iteration cadences in SAFE. We have the iteration at the 2 week level, and we also have the iteration at the PI level. So again, we're self-organizing and self-managing. And frankly, I think here's where the real power of that construct evolves. Because if I have 7 or 8 people working together, they can self-organize and self-manage, but they can't necessarily disband their own team or have 2 teams pick the same feature and work together if they're working in isolation. So what you see inside the art is really a knowledge pool, a team of teams, a set of people devoted to really a single mission, and that's to create the solution that lives at the end of that art. And they do the same thing, right? The team of teams does the same thing the team does, but at a higher level. They deliver working, tested, full system increments every 2 weeks. So now you see the basic pattern. The teams can do good work, they can build their feature or their component, but when they work together, the system is moving forward. And as we'll say later, I like to think of the system as sprinting at that point. The system itself gets new capability every 2 weeks. But we can't do that completely autonomously, right? We need to have a common vision. We want to understand what we're building, what problems it solves. We need agreement on that. We don't want 8 teams on the train, each to build the same module and reproduce their efforts just because everybody needed a parsing engine or they needed an entity extraction engine for a web page. Well, we all need one, so should we all build one? Well, I think not. I think maybe one team should build one. Well, we've got this capability. Well, our feature needed it. Hey, so does our feature. We need it too. So maybe that'd make a great web service or a microservice. Let's just set that up as a microservice. So we need to have some architectural guidance over that process to make sure that we don't do redundant work and that we can really leverage, the benefits of SOA-like constructs and APIs to make sure that our system scales without having to, go down to the method level on every single class. And what about UX? Well, centralizing UX, that's an interesting thing. That seems like that's going to go kind of slow. But what if we had a common set of style guidelines? What if all the teams at least had the same style sheet? They had the same color palettes that they used. They had the same set of widgets. They had the same class library. Even then, if they implemented independently, it's going to look the same, and that's going to be helpful. But more importantly, sometimes just a single person. I mean, I've seen arts with one person, and all that person did was the style guide and the wireframes. And he operated in the cadence with the teams. And that meant that every team was essentially given a wireframe that said, here's the way I've thought about that GUI. And that meant that the other team got a similar wireframe for a similar type of aspect of that same system. So that's extremely helpful, and it creates systems that frankly are much easier to use and delight the user a lot better than if we do that all independently. Common iteration lengths and common ways of estimating work. Why common iteration lengths? We're going to talk a lot about cadence and synchronization. We're certainly going to cover that. Why common estimating? Because we're going to take an economic view here pretty quickly, and we need to be able to estimate work. How do we know what's important? Well, it's one thing to say, let's pick the next most important thing. Well, how big is that thing? If that thing is the most important thing, but it takes 3 times the amount of work as the next most important thing, I may change my mind about how important that is. So we're going to have a common way to look at the work, and we'll cover that as well. Face-to-face planning for collaboration, alignment, and adaptation. I'll bet you're thinking, how does that work? They're distributed. There's 100 of them. What are we going to do? Well, hang on. We'll talk about that at length. But face-to-face planning, there's no substitute for that. It's a principle of the Agile Manifesto, and we're going to use that principle at scale, as we'll see a little bit later. And finally, value delivery via features and benefits. Stories aren't quite enough. They're really cool things, but they're small. They work at the single team level. So a story is a little piece of functionality that can be developed by a single team in a single iteration. Well, a feature is a piece of functionality that can be developed by multiple teams in a single PI. So it's a much bigger thing. So we have to increase our level of abstraction. We also find it convenient to talk to our customers. Every product manager, every marketing person knows about features and benefits. So we're going to exploit that known knowledge about solution features and benefits. So you've seen user stories and features, but we're not confused by that. We recognize that stories are small, and I'll bet you can guess right now that when we implement a feature, we're going to first bust it up into a bunch of stories. We're going to assure that those stories work together, and that's what's going to create the feature functionality. Coordinating large value streams, as I mentioned, what happens if it takes, well, let's just take the example here. There's 3 arts. In this case, we see one release train, we see another release train, and we see a supplier. And maybe they're agile, maybe they're not. Maybe it's external, or maybe internal. What if that's our use case? Well, how do I coordinate that? Now, that's not even a particularly big situation. or a particularly large system, if you will, but it requires coordination. Pretty large solution, right? Let's just say that each of those arts is 100, and maybe the supplier is even bigger. Maybe there's 2 suppliers. So there's 300 or 400 people working here to build maybe the ground station for a satellite, or a medical health information system, or a banking system that's going to be deployed in regions worldwide. Maybe there's 1,000 people working on that. What do we do about that? Well, we have to synchronize multiple art value streams. What do we mean by that? The work of implementation is done by teams who are organized into arts. Arts have a specific size. They max out at about 100 people. After that, the social fabric breaks down, and it's hard to plan face-to-face, and it's hard to, frankly, care a lot about a person's problem if they're not working on the same solution that you're working on. So we need an effective social network to do that. And we're going to work around solution intent. I'll describe this some more. This is the guy hanging over here, solution intent. Quite a story about this. And if I'm building a medical system or a thing that goes bump in the night, or that satellite ground station, don't I have to know what it does? Yeah, I really do. So I can't just throw the story away. Even if it's captured in the test case, I'm going to have to take the data from that test case and wrap it up and say, this system really does this, and it does this well. And what's more, as I approach the problem, some of what I know about this system is fixed. It has to do this. Some is variable. So there's quite a story about developing big systems in a lean and agile fashion, as we'll see as we move down the road here. But if I don't quit over-elaborating, we'll never get onto that story. So let's proceed. Suppliers are our partners. It's a key tenet of lean. I'll cover that again just about an hour from now. I'm going to talk about how critical it is that we treat our suppliers as partners, not suppliers, not the lowest cost provider of the solution subset. What do I get if I go to the lowest cost provider of a solution? I get the lowest cost solution component. Is that the best? Might be. Can't say it isn't, but it might not be. So we want to think about that problem differently. Value delivery via capability. So we needed another word, right? Stories, features, building a big system. This geophysical data satellite that we've been reasoning about, we need 4 times the camera resolution. Wow, that's a big deal. That would be a new capability. I need the ability to control my infusion pump to, down to 1/10 of a milliliter per hour. That's quite a new capability. I need my radar system to be able to detect this type of object. That's a new capability. So we do value delivery via our capabilities. So our teams work together, building large systems. They can coordinate value streams. But let's talk a little bit about the larger intent. Let's talk about the portfolio for a second. We'll organize around the flow of value. Well, aren't we all organized around value? Not necessarily. Many of us are organized around our functional areas. We have our developers sit together for a reason. Maybe our testers, our whole department working inside QA. Maybe our product managers work together. Well, it's not a bad thing, but are they part of the solution set or not? Well, what about our customers? We'll talk a lot about value streams and the expressive power of thinking about the flow of value through the enterprise. And this is a fundamental premise of SAFe, is that we're organized around the flow of value. Lean Agile budgeting empowers decision makers. What are we going to discover when we get there a little later? We're going to discover that traditional project cost accounting and lean and agile development don't work together. It's a terrible match, and we're going to need a better answer. And we'll provide that better answer in the guidance around lean agile budgeting. Kanban systems for portfolio visibility and WIP limits. We've always had Kanban at the portfolio level. We actually have them throughout now. Why Kanban? Well, it's a bit of too much of a lecture here, but very simple. We want to be able to visualize the flow of work and manage the work such that the work we put into the system equals the productive capacity of the system. What happens when I put too many cars on the freeway? Does the throughput of the freeway go up? No, it goes down. So consequently, we have to match demand to capacity, and Kanban systems are unique in their ability to help us do that. Enterprise architecture guides larger technology decisions. What do we mean by that? Let me give you a couple examples. One of our enterprises trading company, and they had actually it wasn't the opportunity, they had the mandate to move to 64-bit back office servers. Well, that wasn't an easy thing. And that was a pretty big decision, because it meant that because of the nature of their business, all the software had to be ported, recompiled, and revalidated. That's a pretty big deal. Another company decided to move their app servers to migrate everything to JBoss. Okay, they like JBoss. They thought they'd get additional performance out of that. It was essentially a license-free situation or very nearly via open source. And if all teams and programs and products run on JBoss, do you think maintenance is going to be enhanced? Absolutely. So there are certain types of things that really lend themselves to centralized decision making. Objective metrics. So we don't fight governance and being measured. We just want to be measured about the stuff that matters, like, is this a good system or not? So we'll talk a lot about how those metrics support governance and improvement. We can't just go to lean agile budgeting and say, hey, this release train or this value stream is we're gonna spend, let's just say, last one I knew, 1.7 times 6 times. We're not gonna just give $35 million to this value stream and hope they do well. We're gonna have to provide some feedback on that. We're gonna have to show some ROI. We don't fight that. We're prudent fiduciaries. Every developer out there has to have their eye on the fact that they're taking an economic view, and we're going to need to support those who need to get these measures. It's folly to fight that system and pretend like it will all just work out okay, because what if we're not building the right thing? What if it doesn't work out okay? We spent $35 million and we got nothing? Doesn't really make any economic sense. Value delivery via epic. So this is the last word we're using to describe solution behavior. We're using the word epic, which actually comes from Agile. It wasn't used exactly this way, but I really liked it in relationship to a story. So we now see that we've used 4 words to describe system behavior. We're going to introduce the 5th one later, non-functional requirements. But we have stories. What's a story? A cool piece of value that a team can do in iteration. What's a feature? A feature is a service provided by the system that a single art can do in a single PI. What's a capability? Well, a capability is a thing that multiple arts, a single value stream that multiple arts can accomplish in a PI. What's an epic? A big cross-cutting initiative, single sign-on across all the solutions. Migrate the entire solution set to cloud hosting. Those are the larger epics that we're going to use to describe the flow of value and our ability to influence the course of action by large centralized initiatives like the ones I just mentioned. So what are your next steps? This course is based upon Leading Safe. This is an instructor-led class. It's offered around the world. If you choose to take that course, maybe with your peers or associates, there is an exam associated with it. It's optional, but that creates the Safe Agilist certification mark. There's a fair number of people out there, 30, 40, 50,000, I'm not sure exactly right now, that have taken Leading Safe. The course is designed for managers and leaders and executives and others who are going to lead rather than follow the transformation. But there's a deeper course as well, Implementing SAFe 4.0 with SPC certification. Again, this is instructor-led. This is a 4-day course, and this yields the SAFe Program Consultant certification, as we call SPC 4 for version 4. And if you head down that path, you'll get the certification mark. You'll also you'll be licensed to teach Leading Safe, our team-based course, and many more courses. You'll get a little branding kit that you can use in your work. You'll get membership in the LinkedIn community of practice, where other SPCs work together to solve problems in the industry. You'll also be fed regular content updates. So as SAFe evolves and the courseware evolves, we'll feed those to you. And if you want to be in the listing, that's great. There's an SPC directory listing. So if you're a consultant or someone who wants others to know about their skills, we'll provide an opportunity for you to have your name in the directory listing. Those are 2 steps. There's certainly more, but those are the 2 that most people follow.